The Dominion vessel drifted like a corpse through the asteroid field, its hull cracked and venting air into the void. A derelict shadow in a sea of silence, the once feared slave transport now pulsed faintly with failing power. Its systems hemorrhaging sparks, its decks strewn with the wreckage of bodies and broken restraints. Inside, the atmosphere was stale with recycled breath and the acrid stench of scorched wiring. Kael Rhys moved like a ghost through the wreckage, plasma rifle loose in his grip. The silent hum of his breathing apparatus cut across the metallic echoes as his boots crunched over shattered glass and torn paneling. He wasn't supposed to be here. Command had rerouted his pod to intercept a Dominion patrol, what remained of it anyway, but something about the distress signal had gnawed at him. He hadn't expected survivors. He definitely hadn't expected her. She was curled in a corner of the brig, barely conscious, her skin a strange, shimmering bronze gold that shimmered in the dim red emergency lighting. Slender, bleeding wrists raw from restraints. She didn't flinch when he approached, just lifted her head enough to meet his eyes. And that was when the noise died. Her gaze was unlike anything Kael had seen in his years across the rim. Her pupils were elongated like a cat's irises, rippling between deep violet and blue, so dark it neared black. Her face was humanoid, but not quite. Bone structure slightly too fine, the lines of her cheekbones drawn by evolution on a different world. And yet there was pain in her expression that needed no translation. Kael lowered his weapon. "What's your name?" he asked, voice crackling through his helmet's external speaker. Her lips parted dry and cracked. "Naira. Elion." He stepped closer, scanning her condition. Malnourished. Dehydrated. But her vitals, as registered on his handheld diagnostic pad, were holding barely. "Easy," he muttered, kneeling. "You're going to be all right." Her laugh was a hoarse whisper, bitter and soft. "That's optimistic." Kael cut through the restraints and her body slumped forward into his arms. The touch startled them both. Her skin warm despite the cold ship. Her breath shaky as she pressed into him involuntarily. "Why?" she asked. "You're human. You should leave me." "Guess I'm not great at following protocol," he muttered. The hull groaned above them. Another section collapsed somewhere down the corridor. The place wouldn't hold much longer. Kael didn't think. He scooped her up, bracing her slight frame against his chest. She was light, too light, and her heartbeat fluttered against his armor like the wings of a dying bird. He moved fast, boots echoing as he sprinted down smoke-filled corridors past charred control panels and ruptured oxygen tanks. The emergency lights flickered out behind him as he crossed into the auxiliary hangar. One escape pod remained its hatch sealed and unmarked by the Dominion's biolocks. Kael punched in his override key, courtesy of the Special Forces training he no longer officially had, and the hatch hissed open. He slid inside with her still in his arms, slamming the panel and engaging the auto-launch. The pod shuddered violently, thrusters firing as they jettisoned from the dying beast. Through the viewport, Kael watched the Dominion slave ship fracture, secondary explosions erupting along its spine, fire blooming silently in space. He turned. She hadn't spoken again, but her eyes were open, watching the wreckage with something like disbelief. Her head rested against his shoulder. Her body trembled with either cold or shock. "What the hell were they doing to you on that ship?" he asked quietly. She didn't answer. Instead, with a fragile motion, she pulled up the sleeve of her tunic. Beneath it, glowing faintly beneath the skin, was an iridescent lattice, a design that moved like liquid metal embedded directly into her flesh. Kael frowned. "Is that a tattoo?" "No," she whispered. "It's a brand, genetic, woven into my DNA." The silence returned, heavy and long. He reached out almost without thinking and touched her forearm. The lattice shifted subtly under his fingers, reacting to his warmth. "That's barbaric." She turned her head toward him. "That's Dominion business." They drifted in silence for several minutes, only the hum of life support filling the air. "They'll be looking for you," Kael said finally. "This mark, can they track you through it?" She nodded. "Anywhere in Dominion space." "Then we don't go through Dominion space." Her eyes widened just slightly. "You'd help me, just like that." Kael shrugged. "What else am I going to do with my sudden unemployment?" She blinked, confused. "Blew up their ship. Pretty sure I'm not welcome in that quadrant anymore." For the first time, a shadow of a smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "I don't understand humans," she murmured. "Most humans don't either," he said, leaning back. "You'll fit right in." The pod spun slowly, stabilizers adjusting course toward a nearby drift hub. Kael rechecked their trajectory and fuel. They'd make it to the ether spire barely. After that, they'd need a plan. He glanced at her again. She was watching the stars now. For a moment, with the red lights casting her features in soft copper, she looked almost serene, but her arm still bore the brand. And Kael knew whatever they were getting into, it wasn't over. Not even close. The ether spire loomed like a broken dagger in the black. A trade hub just outside Dominion patrol zones, it was known as a sanctuary for deserters, smugglers, and the kind of travelers who never used real names. It wasn't beautiful, but it was out of the Dominion's reach, mostly, and that was enough. Kael guided the pod into a low-traffic approach lane, keeping them clear of major scan corridors. Nyra sat beside him in silence, swathed in the spare jacket he'd handed her. Her hands still trembled occasionally, but she no longer avoided eye contact. If anything, her gaze had sharpened. "This place doesn't look like a refuge," she murmured. "It isn't," Kael said, fingers dancing across the control panel. "It's a hiding place. Big difference." The pod docked with a hiss and a click. Pressure equalized. Kael stood, looping a bag over his shoulder. Nyra hesitated before rising, adjusting the collar to hide the shimmering brand beneath her skin. "What's our story?" she asked. "Bonded pair looking for work," he replied without pause. Keeps questions to a minimum, explains why we're traveling together. Her expression shifted somewhere between amused and skeptical. "Bonded, as in mated. Whatever makes sense for your people," he said with a shrug. Her golden cheeks flushed deeper. "I understand the concept." They stepped into chaos. The Ether Spire's central concourse pulsed with sound vendors, shouting engines, screaming mercenaries, laughing too loudly in the corners of dim bars. The lighting flickered intermittently, casting strange shadows along the curved metal walls. Species from half the galaxy brushed past them in rapid succession, most too preoccupied to care who or what Kael and Nyra were. Kael kept his hand lightly at the small of her back. Part guidance, part pretense, part something he didn't want to examine too closely. She didn't pull away. "We need credits," he murmured. "And information." "I have nothing," she said. Kael reached into his boot and pulled a small data chip. "I stole this from a Dominion guard during the escape. It's an access key, should get us into one of their mid-level supply caches here. If we fence it smart, we'll have what we need." Nyra gave him a sidelong glance. "That's resourceful." He grinned. "Special forces. They taught us to make do." They ducked into a bar with a flickering neon sign that read, "The Event Horizon." Inside it was quieter, thick smoke drifting toward a ceiling clogged with filtration failures. Beings hunched over drinks or low-voiced conversations. Kael approached the bartender, a four-armed creature polishing glasses with two hands while leaning with the other two. "What'll it be?" it growled. Kael slid the data chip forward. "Information and a fair trade." The bartender's nostrils flared. "Back room. Ask for Tavok." They barely made it past the third table before a thick-scaled enforcer stepped into their path. Reptilian. Dominion markings on his uniform. His gaze lingered on Nyra like a predator smelling blood. "You two look new," he said, tongue-flicking. "And familiar." Kael's body shifted instinctively, placing himself between Nyra and the enforcer. Just passing through. The enforcer tilted his head, his nostrils flaring as if tasting the air. His eyes snapped to Nyra. "The female smells like Thalari stock, premium merchandise." Nyra stiffened beside him. "She's my bonded mate," Kael said evenly. "Not for sale." The enforcer chuckled. "Humans. Always so sentimental with their property. Let me see your registration." Kael's hand drifted toward the pulse pistol tucked into his waistband. "She's not registered, and we're not looking for trouble." "Oh, but trouble found you," the enforcer sneered, reaching for a scanner. Before the situation could spiral, a new voice cut through. "There you are." A thinner Valen-wearing merchant's garb approached with a warm smile. "You're late. We had an agreement, remember?" Kael caught on immediately. "Right, sorry, we got held up." The enforcer scowled. "They matched the description. Of my clients," the newcomer interrupted smoothly. "Unless you're in the habit of harassing business associates." The enforcer's jaw twitched. "Watch yourself, Vec. And you, Drock, should remember, not all of us are still loyal to the Dominion." The tension hung for a moment longer before the enforcer stepped aside with a growl. Vec gestured casually, leading Kael and Nyra to a secluded booth in the corner. "You're lucky I was watching," he said, sitting. "That was about to get messy." "We appreciate it," Kael said cautiously. "But why help us?" "Because I know desperation when I see it." Vec leaned in. "And I need out. I've worked security for the Dominion's genetic labs. I know things, dangerous things." Nyra's eyes narrowed. "Like what?" "Like the fact that your brand," he said, gesturing at her arm, "isn't just a tracking system. It's a signature from Project Helix. Kael froze. What the hell is Project Helix? Enhanced fertility, genetic blending, cross-species compatibility. You, Nira, Alien aren't just property. You're the prototype for Dominion's future breeding stock. Nyra didn't flinch, but her fingers curled into fists. And you want out, she asked. They'll kill me when they find out, I know, Vex said. But I also know where to find the man who created the early brand sequencing. Dr. Talix Riven. You want that brand gone? He's the only one who can do it. Kael studied him. You'll take us. In exchange for safe passage and protection when this all burns down. Kael nodded slowly. Deal. They shook hands. As they stood to leave, Nira stumbled briefly. Kael's arm caught her waist before she hit the ground. I'm fine, she said quickly, but her voice wavered. You're exhausted, he replied. We'll find somewhere to lay low. She didn't argue. As they moved through the crowd, shoulder to shoulder, Nira leaned in close to whisper near his ear. I still don't understand you, Kael Rhys. Lucky for you, I'm a mystery you'll have time to figure out. She didn't laugh, but she didn't pull away either. The old mining vessel groaned as its landing struts extended, sending vibrations up through the hull like the breath of some slumbering beast. They touched down on Selvaris Prime, a forgotten colony turned derelict research site, where the sun never quite broke through the ash-thick clouds and the wind screamed between jagged peaks like a warning. Kael stood by the viewport pulse rifle slung across his back. Behind him, Nira adjusted the high collar of the patched cloak he'd given her, concealing the mark beneath her skin. Beside her, Vex scrolled through a holographic map with one of his lower arms. Riven's last known lab is 2 clicks north, Vex said, buried under collapsed tunnels and Dominion surveillance drones. Kael glanced at Nira. You good to walk? She gave a small nod. If it gets me closer to being unbranded, yes. The wind outside howled as they exited the ship, their boots crunching on ancient gravel mixed with rust and polymer. The ruins of the facility rose ahead, spires bent like bones, corridors, half-collapsed data cables flapping in the wind like exposed veins. Kael led the way, keeping her close. Their route took them through twisted passageways, past ancient graffiti, etched in languages long dead, and deeper into forgotten places where the Dominion once broke minds and bodies alike. Nira said little, but Kael noticed the way she scanned every doorway, every shadow. The training they'd forced into her still lived in her reflexes. Finally, they reached a sealed bulkhead carved into the side of a crater. The metal had warped from an explosion, likely an old sabotage, but the biometric scanner still hummed softly. Kael knelt beside it, unsheathing a narrow toolkit. Give me 2 minutes. Vec kept watch. Nira stood with her back to the door, her eyes never still. You're quieter than usual, Kael said as he rewired the interface. I'm calculating risk, she said flatly. He looked up. Of trusting you, of this Riven man, of whether this connection I feel when you're near is residual trauma or something real. Kael paused. And what's the current probability? Her eyes flicked to his, inconclusive, but rising. The door clicked open. The corridor beyond was dark, its lights flickering to life only as they stepped through. The air was stale but breathable. Laboratories stretched to either side, coated in dust. Some machines still blinked with half-powered life-running protocols they no longer remembered. They found him slumped in a chair, his white hair matted with dried blood. Dr. Talix Riven wasn't dead, but close. Nira rushed to his side, pulling out a med patch from Kael's pack without needing to ask. She worked quickly, silently. Kael watched her fingers steady, precise, and far more confident than he'd ever seen them. The old man groaned as her touch revived him. You're... Valerie Riven murmured, blinking up at her. And that brand gods. Your Project Helix. I was, she said. Can you undo it? Riven sat up with effort. Not with old tech, but I've made progress. In secret. The Dominion didn't find all of it when they tried to kill me. He led them into the back lab, where a circular chamber pulsed with soft light, its walls covered in swirling symbols, crystalline nodes, and dormant bioreactors. This is a debranding matrix, he said. It uses viral vectors to rewrite the artificial sequences, replace Dominion code with native DNA. Nira folded her arms. And what's the catch? I need a genetic template, Riven said. Pure Thalari would be best, but I doubt you've got one of those on hand. She said nothing. There's another way, Riven continued. I can use compatible DNA to rebuild the corrupted strands. Human DNA, for instance, if the donor's profile is stable and intimately linked to the subject. Kael blinked. You mean like... Riven hesitated. Yes. Reproductive cells would be ideal. Full spectrum data. It's the only way to generate a stable fusion. The procedure would overwrite the brand with a biological echo of the donor's identity. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't tension. It was gravity. Nira turned to Kael. That's not a light request. He shook his head. It's your choice, your body, your mind. She stepped closer to him, her eyes unreadable. On Thalara, we don't take genetic exchange lightly. It's sacred, a joining of souls. Kael held her gaze. If there's another way. There isn't, she said. He stepped forward, took her hands. I've felt something since that slave ship. When I look at you, I don't see some scientific anomaly. I see a person who's fought to stay herself despite everything. If this bond can free you, I'll do it. Her smile came slowly ghost-like. I don't understand you, Kael Rhys, she whispered, but I trust you. They entered the chamber together. Riven gave them privacy, sealing the doors with a quiet hiss. The lights dimmed. Crystalline pulses moved around them, scanning their biological signatures. The chamber felt alive, breathing, humming with ancient biotech that had never known cruelty, only purpose. Kael laid a trembling hand on Nira's cheek. She leaned into it, the glow beneath her skin flickering in resonance with his touch. And when their foreheads touched, something shifted. They weren't just two bodies anymore. Thoughts rippled between them, memories, feelings, sensations. His hunger, her fear, his grief, her hope. It all passed between them like wind through a canyon, reshaping the stone of who they had been. She gasped softly, I feel you, and I feel you. The chamber came alive. Riven's systems engaged. The biotech surrounded them with golden light. As the fusion began subtle at first, like warmth spreading through the veins, then sharper, deeper DNA rearranged strand by strand. The Dominion brand resisted sparking crimson pain through Nira's body, but the viral vectors pushed harder, fueled by Kael's offering. She didn't scream. She held his hand, and he held on like his life depended on it. The fusion left a silence in its wake, but it wasn't emptiness. It was stillness, an awareness settling into place like two stars finding their orbit. Kael sat beside Nira as her breathing slowed. Her skin glowed faintly in the dim light of the healing chamber, the iridescent lattice once marking her arm now gone. In its place, nothing. Smooth skin, unbranded, unclaimed. Riven stood by a nearby console, reading vitals from a cascading set of glyphs. The process was successful, he said, voice low with awe. The Dominion code has been completely overwritten. Kael's head turned sharply. And the side effects? The doctor hesitated. Unexpected. Their DNA didn't just merge, it synchronized. Formed a resonance loop. Psychophysical in nature. They're connected now. Not just emotionally or symbolically, biologically, neurologically. Nira stirred eyelids fluttering. Kael took her hand before she could even speak. I'm here. Her voice came out hoarse. I know. She sat up slowly, blinking as the world returned. She looked at Kael first, then down at her forearm. Her breath caught. It's gone. He nodded. I feel lighter, she whispered. You are. Riven spoke again. It's more than symbolic. You share a limited feedback loop now. Vital signs, emotional surges, maybe even surface thoughts with proximity. The bond is stable, stronger than anything I've seen. She turned to Kael again. That explains why I can feel your heart pounding. Kael blinked. Wait, you can actually... I can feel it. He felt something then, too. A warmth that wasn't his. Her relief. Her curiosity. And behind it a flicker of something gentler, deeper. It curled around the edges of his mind like the aftertaste of light. Then the alarm screamed. Klaxons echoed through the old facility, high-pitched, urgent. A proximity warning lit up every console. Riven swore. Dominion patrols. Multiple vessels entering Selvaris orbit. Kael was already on his feet, helping Nira stand. She moved with more strength than before, the chamber's regenerative energy still humming in her limbs. The glow beneath her skin had dimmed, but it was still there. Faint pulses synchronized with Kael's breath. We have to go, Kael said. They rushed to the exit, Vec waiting by the ship with a pulse rifle and a scowl. I told you they'd come. Kael vaulted up the ramp, powering the engines, while Vec plotted the jump route. Nira slid into the seat beside him, hands trembling as she pulled up the ship's defensive systems. Kael glanced over. Can you operate this interface? She nodded, and her fingers danced across the screen with preternatural precision. The ship responded to her like it had known her for years. Riven frowned. That's not normal. What Kael said. The interface this ship shouldn't recognize her commands. It's key-locked to Vec's biosignature. Vec's brow furrowed. It is. Nira blinked. It just responded. Riven snapped his fingers. Of course. The genetic resonance. She's now partially human enough that Dominion tech keyed to Kael's species interprets her as a co-owner. The fusion gave her hybrid access. Kael grinned. Guess I'm rubbing off on you. Nira shot him a look. That better not be a joke about your DNA. He smirked. Not yet. The ship lifted off as Dominion fighters screamed through the clouds behind them. Energy blasts lit up the sky, shredding old towers and sending waves of plasma across the ruins. Kael pulled the yoke into a hard left. Brace! The ship lurched, banking between debris. Nira locked the shields, while Vec unleashed counterfire from the aft turret. One drone exploded in a brilliant green flash. 2 more swarmed in. Kael gritted his teeth, but before he could act, Nira's hand flew to the control node. Her fingers danced faster, her mind through their bond connecting directly with Kael's instincts. Their thoughts merged in fragments. Target vectors, enemy speed, predictive fire angles. She wasn't just working beside him, she was completing him. Kael moved without needing to ask what she was doing. Their ship cut through the atmosphere like a blade twisting between incoming plasma bolts. With precision, neither of them had solo. Nira's responses came milliseconds ahead of the system warnings. She was reading the battle through Kael's mind, adapting faster than any AI. A drone swooped behind them. Kael dipped the nose. Nira fired. Bullseye. Their movements synchronized into a seamless dance of propulsion and defense. Riven whispered from the back. They're fighting as one. Vec growled. Let's hope that's enough. The final drone locked on, but Kael swerved beneath a collapsing platform, and Nira unleashed a final volley into its intake port. The thing spiraled out of control, crashing into the ridge with a scream of fire. Silence fell broken only by the panting breath of the crew. Then the ship's console blinked path clear. Course stable. Kael exhaled. We're clear for the jump. Nira leaned back, eyes closed, her skin glowing again less intensely, more rhythmically. Kael looked at her. She didn't speak, but he felt her pride. Her adrenaline, her rising affection. It all rippled along the edge of their bond like heat waves off sunlit stone. She opened her eyes. I felt everything you did in that fight. So did I. Their foreheads touched again unconsciously now. An instinct already burned into muscle memory. I think she whispered, we're not just bonded. Kael blinked. What are we then? She smiled faintly. We're becoming something new. The stars outside the viewport burned like knives, sharp, silent, and unblinking. The Dominion's hold on this sector was unraveling, but they wouldn't let it go without blood. And somewhere in the chaos, their most dangerous weapon wasn't a fleet or a bomb or even a new wave of drones. It was Nira Elion's body. Riven hunched over the console in the aft lab, his eyes scanning lines of alien script projected in a pale blue glow. The files streamed upward, genetic diagrams, Dominion logs, confidential reports, long thought erased. Kael and Nira stood behind him, hands unconsciously linked as the truth crystallized before them. She was never just branded, Riven murmured. She was built. Nira's eyes narrowed. Explain. You weren't just tagged for ownership. You were engineered. Your genome adjusted through Project Helix to be hyper-receptive to cross-species fusion, specifically tailored to carry hybrid offspring with maximum trait retention. Not just breeding stock. Blueprint stock. Kael's blood chilled. You mean they plan to use her genetics to mass-produce a new class of engineered beings? Riven nodded grimly. Designer offspring, built from Thalari adaptability and Dominion control markers. And with your fusion, he looked up at Kael. You've unlocked something they never intended. Nira stepped forward, jaw clenched. Like what? Look! Riven tapped the screen. The resonance loop you two formed, it's creating recursive genetic harmonization. Your DNA is evolving in tandem. Not just static fusion, it's alive, updating, adapting. Kael frowned. That sounds unstable. It should be, Riven admitted, but it's not. It's accelerating. And look here, he highlighted a wave signature. This signal is being broadcast, not just internally, externally. Nira's breath caught. What? You're emitting a low-frequency genetic pulse. Every Dominion-coded system it touches glitches. Their surveillance arrays their slave tracker networks, even their biotech armor. It's not just noise, it's a counter-signal. Kael leaned closer. You're saying she's jamming the Dominion? Worse, Riven said. She's corrupting them. Every system tuned to Helix-coded DNA can't process her anymore. It's crashing protocols. You are the virus in their machine. A moment of stunned silence followed. Then Vec burst through the cockpit door. We've got a problem. Kael turned. Of course we do. Vec growled. Dominion armadas converging on us. Not a patrol fleet level. They're coming to erase you two from existence. How long, Kael asked. Minutes. Kael looked at Nyra. Options. She closed her eyes, reaching inward. When she opened them again, her voice was calm. We don't run. Kael blinked. Come again. They want to erase this connection, she said. But if we get close enough deep into one of their main control ships, I can broadcast the signal directly into their systems, burn it into their backbone. Riven nodded slowly. That could unravel the entire Helix protocol, cripple their tracking arrays, shatter every genetic leash they've wrapped around their property. But we'd have to get close, Kael said. Right into their core. Vex snorted. That's suicide. Kael turned to Nyra again. You sure about this? She nodded. They made me to be a weapon. It's time they learned what kind. They came in low, riding the magnetic wake of a disabled cargo ship to slip through the outer perimeter. Dominion dreadnoughts floated like beasts in the dark, huge, silent, bristling with weapons and signal arrays. The plan was simple. Insane, but simple. Riven would pilot the decoy drone drawing fire. Vec would stay with the ship engines, hot for a fast getaway. Kael and Nyra would board the flagship, the Arcos Crucible, and deliver the viral signal directly into its command core. As they suited up in the launch bay, Nyra's fingers lingered over Kael's armor seals. This could be it, she said. He looked at her. No, this is just the middle. She smiled faintly, but the warmth in her chest pressed into his, through the bond, pride, fear, and something more primal purpose. They launched in a stealth pod, magnetically tethered to a Dominion scavenger unit. The outer hull of the Crucible glinted like black ice. No visible ports, no windows, just endless metal and glowing veins of signal light. Kael guided them to a maintenance breach. They slipped inside. The corridors of the Crucible pulsed with ambient energy. Organic metal flowed along the walls like veins beneath skin. Kael kept his weapon raised. Nyra stayed close, every step synchronized like they'd rehearsed it for years. They reached the command nexus. A living machine spread out before them, a writhing sphere of signal threads and neural cores. Dominion operators blinked in surprise, their humanoid forms half melded with the machinery. Then alarms screamed. Kael dropped the first two guards with clean pulse shots. Nyra didn't even flinch. She stepped forward, palms glowing faintly with internal resonance. Now, Kael shouted. She plunged her hands into the core. The world exploded. The signal raced outward like a scream made of light. Kael's visor lit up with cascading error codes. Across the Dominion network, systems faltered, rebooted, then crashed. Slave collars released. Tracking protocols erased. DNA archives corrupted beyond repair. On planets across the rim, Dominion slaves collapsed, brands erased in real time. Kael felt it through her. The pain, the power, the choice. And then it stopped. The core flickered and died. They ran. Fire spread through the Crucible as containment fields failed. They sprinted through crumbling passageways, dodging collapsing supports and stunned personnel. Nyra nearly fell when a tremor shook the floor, but Kael caught her, his grip tightening. I've got you, he growled. I know. They leapt into the evac pod seals, engaging just as the Arcos Crucible erupted behind them, consumed in its own failure. Kael held her hand as the stars rushed past, feeling her exhaustion, her triumph, her tears. They had just broken an empire. Together, the evac pod drifted silently through the chaos. Behind them, the Dominion fleet staggered its central command, shattered its vessels, blinking out of formation like confused insects. Dozens of slave collars had failed in unison. Entire battalions of compliant assets had turned on their handlers. Rebellion was no longer a whisper, it was a song. A war cry built not from weapons, but from freedom. Kael watched the burning wreck of the Arcos Crucible shrink behind them through the viewport. The firelight cast strange shadows across Nyra's face. She leaned against the curved hull of the pod, her skin flushed, her breathing slow. She looked worn, but more than that changed. You did it, he said quietly. Her eyes half-lidded open to meet his. We did it. Kael smiled, and Riven was right. That signal, it didn't just short-circuit their systems. You broke their philosophy, their infrastructure. You're not a tool anymore. I never was, she murmured. But now, they can't pretend otherwise. They docked, with the ship Vec was waiting, engines already warm, weapons still hot. Riven stood in the airlock with a data drive in one hand and a wild grin stretched across his weathered face. It's done, the scientist said. The Dominion Helix network is corrupted beyond recovery. The data, the control codes, all of it's gone. And thanks to the backup stream you triggered, the viral resonance is replicating. Even now it's unraveling their outposts. Kael helped Nira step into the corridor. Her legs trembled, but he didn't need to ask how she felt. The bond pulsed between them, steady as a second heartbeat. Riven lowered his voice. "You need to see this." He led them to the central display, which showed a map of known Dominion space. Red markers blinked across dozens of systems. One by one, they were flickering to black. "Those are their slave centers," Riven explained. "Offline. Every one of them." Vec crossed his arms. "So what now? We run? Or do we pick the next target?" Kael turned to Nira. She looked at the display, then at Kael, then placed a hand over her abdomen almost unconsciously. He blinked. "Nira." She met his eyes, calm and steady. "Something's different," Riven inhaled. "Of course, the fusion protocol. We suspected, but I couldn't confirm it until now." Kael stepped closer, voice low. "You're saying?" "Yes," Nira said softly. "I can feel it. Not just you anymore. There's a third rhythm in the bond now. Smaller, newer, but real." For a moment, no one spoke. Kael felt it not with his ears or his skin, but through the resonance itself. A faint flutter, an echo in the current between their minds. A spark. "We created life," she whispered. "Something entirely new, a being of both our worlds." Vec gave a sharp whistle. "A kid." From that chamber, Riven's eyes widened. "You don't understand. This child, this union is something the Dominion never intended. You've fused human and Thalari DNA beyond theoretical limits. The implications." "I don't care about implications," Kael said. "I care that they'll come hunting for her. For them." Nira smiled, weary but radiant. "Then let them come." Riven looked to the others. "There's one last step. We need to get the evidence to the Galactic Council before the Dominion spreads their own narrative. They'll try to frame this as sabotage, terrorism. But if we reach the right people, the ones not bought, this could end everything." Kael nodded. "Coordinates," encrypted Riven said. "But I have old friends in the Resistance. They'll get us in." Vec muttered. "We better go now. Dominion backup squadrons are moving again. They're damaged but not blind." Kael took Nira's hand. "Ready." She leaned into him, her free hand still resting gently over the life inside her. "With you, always." They moved toward the bridge. The stars opened before them, no longer cold, but full of potential. A future written not by dominators or empires, but by choices made in defiance. In love, in humanity, whatever species that now meant. As they jumped to FTL, Kael felt the pulse of the bond steady and strong. Not just between him and Nira, but something deeper, wider. Something beginning. Final section. Summary and farewell. Thus ends the story of Kael Rhys and Nira Elien. Two strangers thrown together by fate in the wreckage of a broken empire who forged a bond no empire could contain. What began as a rescue became a revolution. A soldier defying orders, a captive rewriting her identity, and a child unborn, but undeniable becoming the seed of a new era. Together, they didn't just survive, they changed everything. In the universe of the Dominion, they were supposed to be statistics, experiments, weapons, assets. But through sacrifice, choice, and love, they became symbols of what it means to be free. Their story isn't just about the fall of a regime. It's about reclaiming personhood, about breaking the chains written in DNA, and about the quiet power of compassion in a world built on control. If this story moved you, stirred something in you, or made you think about humanity, whether born or built, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video. Your support helps these stories reach further across the stars. Until next time, keep watching the skies. And don't forget, freedom isn't just a right, it's a choice.